The sound of papers hitting the floor echoed throughout the office like a slap. My hands trembled as I gathered the scattered documents, feeling the stares of every employee on my back. My own son, Charles, had just announced in front of the entire team that Brenda, his wife of only 28 years, would be the new general manager. I, Florence Miller, after 30 years of building this company from scratch, had been replaced by a girl who thought running a business was like managing her social media accounts. "Mom, please try to understand," Charles murmured, approaching me as I calmly packed my things with a composure I didn't even recognize. "Brenda has a business degree, and she's a whiz with technology. The company needs to modernize." I looked up and met his eyes directly. The same eyes I had first seen 43 years ago in the hospital when I swore I would do everything to give him the best life possible. Now, those eyes looked back at me with a mix of guilt and determination that broke my heart. "Modernize," I repeated in a low voice, closing the last drawer of my desk. "Do you mean modernize like when I implemented the electronic billing system 5 years ago? Or like when I digitized the entire client archive?" Brenda appeared by his side with that fake smile I knew so well. She wore an emerald green dress that probably cost more than the monthly salary of Joseph, our oldest employee. Her perfectly manicured nails drummed on the folder she held in her hands, like a war trophy. "Florence, don't take it personally," she said with that syrupy voice she used when she wanted to sound professional. "It's just that things have changed a lot. Everything is digital now, social media, online marketing. We need new blood." New blood, as if my 30 years of experience, my sleepless nights saving contracts, my 12-hour days building client relationships were old, rotten blood. As if it wasn't me who turned this company from a small family business into a company that invoiced more than $2 million a year. "You're right," I finally said, closing my portfolio with a dry click. "Things have changed a lot." Joseph, who had been working with me for 25 years, timidly approached. He had witnessed every crisis, every triumph, every early morning we spent saving a contract. His eyes were glassy, and he avoided looking at Charles. "Mrs. Miller," he whispered, "this isn't right. You are the soul of this company." I placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled. "Joseph, everything is going to be okay, I promise." Brenda cleared her throat impatiently. "Joseph, right? Well, since we're all here, I'd like to take the opportunity to tell you that there will be some changes in the team. We need younger, more dynamic people." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Fatima, our 55-year-old accountant, turn pale. Albert had been our most important client for the last 25 years, and I knew he only trusted the team he had known his whole life. "Very well," I said, getting up from my chair for the last time. "Then I wish you the best of luck. You're going to need it." I walked towards the door with my head held high, feeling every step echo in the absolute silence. Before leaving, I turned around one last time. "Oh, I almost forgot," I said with a blood-chilling smile. "Albert called this morning. He wants to personally review the renewal contracts. He's going to love the changes." I saw Brenda's face change slightly, but it was already too late for regrets. The door closed behind me with a final sound that marked the end of an era. But this, my friends, was just the beginning. 3 days after my public humiliation, I woke up at 5 a.m., just as I had for the last 30 years. The difference was that now I had nowhere to go. I sat in the kitchen with my coffee, watching the golden sunrise stretch over the city. And for the first time in decades, the silence didn't calm me. My phone vibrated, a message from Joseph. "Mrs. Miller, can we talk? It's urgent." We met at the corner coffee shop, the one where we used to have breakfast when we had early meetings with clients. Joseph arrived with deep dark circles under his eyes and trembling hands. He sat across from me and sighed like a defeated man. "Mom, this is a disaster," he began, nervously moving his coffee cup. "Yesterday, Brenda fired 3 people from the customer service department. She said they were going to automate everything with a chatbot." "A chatbot," I repeated, feeling my stomach churn. To serve clients like Albert who have been with us for 25 years. That's not all, Joseph continued, lowering his voice. She also cancelled the cleaning service contract. She says it's an unnecessary expense and that the employees can clean their own areas. I stayed quiet, processing the information. Albert was an old-school man, one of those who valued personal treatment, trust built year after year. He had seen his hardware company grow from a small store to a chain with 30 branches. He wasn't just a client, he was practically family. Joseph, I need you to do me a favour, I said finally. But first, tell me something. Do you trust me? His eyes filled with tears. Mrs. Miller, you saved me when nobody else would give me a job. My daughter was able to go to medical school thanks to the bonuses you gave me. Of course, I trust you. Perfect. Then I need you to be my eyes and ears inside the company, but it has to be our absolute secret. He nodded vigorously. Tell me what you need. Over the next 2 weeks, Joseph became my inside man. Every day he reported the disasters Brenda was causing, one after another. She had switched all the suppliers for cheaper ones without checking the quality. She implemented a flexible scheduling system that in reality meant nobody knew when to work. And worst of all, she had started treating the old clients as if they were an annoyance from the past. Today, she told Mrs. Angelica that if she didn't like the new online ordering system, she could look for another supplier, Joseph told me during one of our secret meetings. Mrs. Angelica, who has been our client for 15 years. Angelica owned a chain of boutiques and had always been very specific with her orders. She needed personalized attention, constant follow-up. She wasn't the type of client that could be handled with an automated system. And Charles, what does Charles say about all this? I asked, even though a part of me already knew the answer. Mr. Charles spends most of his time golfing, Joseph sighed. He says he trusts Brenda completely and that she knows what she's doing. That night, alone at home, I started doing something I hadn't done in years, taking detailed notes. I pulled out an old notebook and began to write down every disaster Joseph reported to me. Dates, names, specific decisions. If they were going to destroy my life, at least I was going to document how they did it. The breaking point came on Friday of the 3rd week. Joseph called me, almost crying. Mrs. Miller, Brenda just fired Fatima. My heart stopped. Fatima had been our accountant for more than 20 years. She knew every number, every client, every financial detail of the company better than anyone. On what pretext? I asked, feeling a simmering rage begin to boil in my veins. She says she's going to hire an external accounting firm that is more modern and efficient. An external firm, of course, one that didn't know the history of each transaction, every special agreement we had made with loyal clients, every little detail that kept that company running like a Swiss watch. Joseph, I need you to go see Fatima tonight. Tell her to come to my house tomorrow morning. Tell her it's important. The next day, Fatima arrived at my door with red eyes from crying so much. She was a small woman with grey hair, always perfectly coiffed, who had dedicated half her life to keeping our company's finances in order. Florence, she said as soon as she saw me, this is so unfair, after everything we've built together. I hugged her tight. Fatima, I need to ask you for something very important, and I need you to trust me as you always have. We sat in my living room and I explained my plan. I needed her to help me understand exactly how badly they were managing the finances. Fatima had backup copies of everything because, like a good old-school accountant, she never trusted digital systems alone. Look at this, she said, extending a folder full of documents. In these 3 weeks, expenses have increased by 40%, but income has decreased by 20%, and that's not even counting the big clients we haven't lost yet. Haven't lost yet, I repeated. Fatima looked at me with a grave expression. Albert has been calling every day, asking for you. Brenda tells him you're on vacation, but he's not stupid. He knows your voice, he knows your schedule, he knows something is wrong. I felt a cold smile begin to form on my lips. Albert, my most loyal client, the man who had helped me keep the company afloat during the 2008 economic crisis, the man who moved contracts worth $800,000 a year. Fatima, I finally said, I think it's time we called Albert back. On Monday morning, I decided it was time to act. I put on my favorite grey suit. I styled my hair as I always had for important meetings and headed to the cafe where I used to meet Albert when we needed to discuss delicate matters away from the office. Albert Harrison was a 68-year-old man with a perfectly groomed white mustache and a slow way of speaking that immediately conveyed authority. When he saw me enter, he stood up immediately with an expression of relief mixed with concern. "Florence, for heaven's sake," he said, hugging me as if I were his younger sister. "I've been calling your office for weeks, and they tell me you're on vacation, but I know your voice when you answer the phone. I know it wasn't you who was picking up." I sat across from him, feeling the weight of the years of mutual trust. Albert had been more than a client. He had been my mentor when I inherited the business from my father, my advisor during crises, my friend in the most difficult times. "Albert, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to me until the end before you draw any conclusions." His grey eyes hardened slightly. I had learned to read that expression over the years. It was the same one he got when he suspected someone was trying to deceive him in business. I told him everything, from the public humiliation to the disasters Brenda had been causing. Albert listened in silence, nodding occasionally, his fingers drumming on the wooden table. "Are you telling me that this young woman who doesn't know the difference between a balance sheet and an income statement is handling our contracts?" he finally asked, his voice full of disbelief. "Worse than that, Albert. She fired Fatima, who personally handled your account. She implemented an automated system for everything. There's no more personalized attention." Albert leaned back in his chair, processing the information. For 25 years, his company had grown alongside ours. Every special order, every last-minute emergency, every adjustment in payment terms had been handled personally by our team. He paid premium prices precisely for that personalized service. "Florence," he said after a long silence, "you know I'm not an impulsive man, but you also know I don't tolerate being taken for an idiot." "I know, Albert, which is why I need to ask you for a favor. Tell me. I need you to test her, to call her with a real complex problem, one that requires experience and judgment. I want to see how she reacts when she faces a situation she can't solve with a chatbot." A sly smile appeared on his weathered face. "Florence, I think I have exactly what you need." That same afternoon, Albert called me, laughing as I hadn't heard him laugh in years. "Florence, I just hung up with your successor," he said sarcastically. I explained that I needed to place an urgent order for special materials for an overseas project, materials that require specific certifications, import permits, and coordination with 3 different suppliers. "And?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from his tone. "She told me to fill out an online form and that the system would take care of everything automatically. When I explained that this type of order can't be done with a form, she told me that if I didn't adapt to the new systems, maybe I should look for a more modern supplier." I felt cold satisfaction spread through my chest. "Did you tell her what the project was about?" "I mentioned it was for the expansion of my hardware stores into Central America, a project of $2 million in materials over the next 3 years. "And what did she say?" "That the online form could handle orders of any size." We were quiet for a moment, taking in the enormity of what had just happened. Brenda had casually dismissed a client who represented almost 30% of the company's annual revenue. "Albert," I finally said, "can you give me 2 weeks before you make any final decisions?" "Of course, Florence, but you know that if this isn't resolved soon, I'm going to have to look for alternatives. I can't risk my business for the whims of a young woman." That night, I called Joseph for an emergency meeting. This time we met at my house, where we could talk freely. "Joseph, I need you to get me some very specific information," I said, serving him a strong coffee. I need to know exactly what other clients have had problems with Brenda. I need names, dates, and details of each incident. Joseph pulled a crumpled notebook from his pocket. Mrs. Miller, I already started. I've been taking notes since day one. For the next 2 hours, Joseph recounted a list of disasters that chilled my blood. Angelica, the boutique owner, had cancelled 3 orders because the new system couldn't handle her particular specifications. Theophilus, who ran a chain of restaurants, had threatened to change suppliers after Brenda told him that his weekly orders were inefficient, and he should place monthly orders like everyone else. And Fabian? I asked, referring to the contractor who had been our client for 15 years. Fabian is furious, Joseph sighed. You know, he always needs materials with very specific delivery times because he coordinates with construction schedules. Brenda told him the new system only does deliveries on Tuesdays and Fridays, and if that didn't suit him, he could look for another supplier. Fabian's projects were worth $500,000 annually. His social housing constructions required perfect timing, deliveries coordinated to the minute. He wasn't the type of client who could adapt to rigid schedules. Joseph, I said, feeling like a general planning a battle. Tomorrow I want you to tell Brenda that several clients are asking specifically for me. Invent any excuse, but I want her to know that I'm not so easy to replace. Are you sure? That could make her more upset. Exactly, I smiled. I want her to get upset. I want her to get nervous. A nervous person makes more mistakes. The next day, Joseph carried out his mission. He reported that Brenda had a fit of rage when she learned that clients were asking for me. She told everyone that you were part of the past and that clients had to adapt or leave, Joseph told me over the phone. But Mrs. Miller, she looked very nervous. She was biting her nails and pacing back and forth. Perfect. The plan was working. That same afternoon, Fatima visited me with even more interesting news. She had been reviewing the financial documents she had in her possession and had discovered something that chilled my blood. Florence, she said, her voice trembling, there are money movements I don't understand, transfers to accounts I don't recognize, and the amounts don't match the reported expenses. I asked her to show me the documents. Indeed, there were transfers for considerable amounts to an account that did not appear in any of our usual supplier records. Fatima, I said, feeling the adrenaline begin to pump through my veins. I think we just found something much more serious than simple incompetence. What do you mean? I mean that maybe Brenda isn't just incompetent. Maybe she's also a thief. That night I stayed up very late planning my next move. It was no longer just about getting my job back. It was about saving the company I had built with my own hands and making sure that the person who had humiliated me paid for every one of her destructive decisions. The war had officially begun, and I had all the experience in the world to win it. On Wednesday morning, I decided it was time to involve a professional. I called my lawyer, Mr. Herrera, a serious 58-year-old man who had handled all the company's legal affairs for the last 12 years. If there were financial irregularities, he would know exactly what to do. Florence, he said when I explained the situation, this is more serious than you thought. If there are truly unauthorized transfers, we're talking about embezzlement. That's a federal crime. We met in his office that same afternoon. Fatima brought all the documents she had been able to get, including the backup copies she always kept at home for precaution. Mr. Herrera reviewed each paper with the meticulousness of a surgeon. Look at this, he said after 2 hours of analysis, pointing to a series of transfers. These 3 transfers for a total of $10,000 were made to an account in the name of Digital Consultants BM. Do you know that company? Fatima and I looked at each other. We had never heard that name. BM, I murmured, feeling my skin crawl. Like Brenda Miller. Mr. Herrera raised an eyebrow. Exactly what I was thinking. We need to investigate further, but this smells very bad. What can we do legally? I asked. For now, document everything. We need more evidence before making any formal accusations. But Florence, if this is what it looks like, your daughter-in-law is not only incompetent, she's a criminal. That night, I called Joseph for an urgent meeting. This time it was different. It was no longer just about incompetence or family fights. If Brenda was stealing money from the company, all the employees were at risk. Joseph, I said when he arrived at my house, I need you to be very careful with what I'm about to ask you. It could be dangerous. His eyes lit up with determination. Mrs. Miller, after everything you've done for me, I would do anything. I need you to find out everything you can about that digital consultants company discreetly. And I need you to be alert to any conversation between Brenda and Charles about money or bank accounts. Over the next few days, Joseph became the perfect spy. His position as a maintenance employee allowed him to be everywhere without attracting attention. He cleaned the offices when they thought no one was around. He went through the wastebaskets full of important documents that Brenda carelessly threw away. On Friday, he called me, his voice trembling with excitement. Mrs. Miller, I found something important in the trash from Brenda's office. A signed contract with Digital Consultants BM for technological modernization services. But here's the interesting part. The company's address is the same as the apartment where Brenda lived before she married Mr. Charles. I felt my blood run cold. Are you sure? Completely sure. I recognized the address because I went to drop off some documents there 2 years ago when she started working at the company. Brenda had created a shell company to steal money from the company. She was not only incompetent, she was a professional scam artist, and my son was completely blind to what was happening. Joseph, I need you to copy that document and bring it to me, but be very careful. If Brenda suspects something, it could be very dangerous for you. That same afternoon, Mr. Herrera reviewed the falsified contract. His expression grew more serious with each line he read. Florence, this is solid evidence of fraud. With this and the financial documents Fatima has, we can file a formal complaint. But first, I need to ask you something very serious. Are you prepared for this to destroy your relationship with your son? Because when I expose what his wife has been doing, he's going to have to choose between believing you or believing her. The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. Charles was my only son, the most important person in my life for 43 years. But there was also the company I had built with my own sweat and tears, the legacy I wanted to leave him, the employees who depended on those jobs to feed their families. Mr. Herrera, I said finally, my son is married to a thief. If I don't do something now, there won't be anything left to inherit. On Monday morning, I decided to speed up the process. It was time for Albert to know exactly who he was dealing with. I called him and asked him to meet me at my house. Albert, what I'm about to tell you is going to surprise you, but I need you to be prepared to make important decisions. I showed him all the documents we had collected, the irregular transfers, the fake contract, the evidence of the shell company. Albert listened in silence, but I could see his face hardening progressively. Florence, he said finally, this woman is not only incompetent, she's a criminal, and your son is allowing her to destroy everything you built. I know, but I need your help for the next step of my plan. Tell me what you need. Tomorrow, I want you to call the company and request an urgent meeting with management. Tell them you're considering doubling your contracts, but that you need to discuss very specific terms in person. Insist that you want to see the financial books before committing to such a large contract. Albert smiled with that sly smile I knew so well. I understand. You want me to put her in a situation where she can't avoid showing her incompetence and possibly her illegal activities. Exactly. A formal meeting with witnesses where everything she says and does is recorded. Florence, you're brilliant, but are you sure you want to be there? I'm not going to be there officially, but Joseph is going to be there, casually cleaning the meeting room, and Mr. Herrera will be waiting in the parking lot, ready to act, if we find what we think we're going to find. That night, I called Joseph to give him the final instructions. Tomorrow is going to be a very important day, I told him. Albert will arrive at 10 a.m. for a meeting with Brenda and Charles. You are going to be cleaning the meeting room. I want you to listen to every word, observe every reaction, and pay special attention if they mention anything about the company's finances. Mrs. Miller, Joseph said in a serious voice, do you think this is going to work? Joseph, after 30 years in this business, I've learned something very important. Incompetent people always give themselves away when they feel pressured, and dishonest people make mistakes when they think no one is watching them. The night before the decisive meeting, I stayed up planning every detail. I had spent weeks documenting every mistake, every lie, every irregularity. Tomorrow would be the day that everything would come to light. Brenda had underestimated the woman who had built that company from scratch. She had thought that because she was young and modern, she could manipulate everyone, but she had made the biggest mistake of her life. She had stolen from the wrong company and had humiliated the wrong person. Tomorrow she would find out what it meant to face someone with 30 years of business experience and an iron determination to protect what was hers. On Tuesday at 9:45 a.m., I was parked half a block from the company with my heart pounding like a teenager on her first date. From my car, I could see the main entrance, and at exactly 10 o'clock, I saw Albert arrive in his black Mercedes. He wore his grey suit for important occasions and walked with that determination I knew so well. Mr. Herrera was parked across the street with all the legal documents ready in case we needed to act immediately. We had planned every detail as if it were a military operation. My phone vibrated. A message from Joseph. He's here. I'm in position. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. After 30 years of building this company, after all the sleepless nights, all the sacrifices, all the crises we had overcome together, it would all come down to the next 60 minutes. At 10:15, Joseph sent me the first report. Mr. Albert asked to see the financial statements for the last quarter. Brenda got nervous. She says it's all in the new system and it's very complicated. I smiled bitterly. Financial statements were basic information that any competent manager should have at their fingertips, especially when dealing with a client who handled $800,000 a year. 10 minutes later, another message. Albert asked why operating costs had increased so much. Brenda blamed inflation. Mr. Albert asked her for specific numbers. She doesn't have them. I could perfectly imagine the scene. Albert with his notebook, meticulously taking notes, asking the precise questions he knew a competent manager should be able to answer without blinking. And Brenda, probably sweating in her expensive dress, realizing she was completely out of her league. At 10:35, the message I was waiting for arrived. Albert mentioned the Digital Consultants BM contract. He asked what specific services they are providing for that money. Brenda went pale. She says they are very advanced technological modernization services. There was the moment of truth. Albert knew exactly what question to ask to put Brenda against the wall. My phone rang. It was Joseph whispering from the bathroom. Mrs. Miller, this is going very badly for her. Mr. Albert asked if he could speak directly with the digital consultants to better understand their methodology. Brenda told him it was confidential information, so he was asked to see the detailed invoices for the services. And what happened? I whispered. She excused herself, saying she had to go to the bathroom. She ran out of the room. Mr. Charles was left alone with Albert, and he looks very confused. Perfect. Brenda was panicking. An innocent person would have answered the questions without a problem or would have called Fatima to bring the documents. But a guilty person does exactly what Brenda was doing, flee. 5 minutes later, Joseph reported again. Brenda came back very nervous. She told Albert that the documents he asked for are in her office and that she needs a few minutes to organize them. Albert told her that there was no problem, he could wait. I knew exactly what was happening. Brenda was in her office desperately trying to invent false documents or find a credible excuse, but it was too late. Albert was too smart and had too much experience to fall for amateur lies. At 11 a.m., my phone rang. It was Albert. "Florence," he said in a grave voice, "you need to come here right now. Your daughter-in-law just made the biggest mistake of her life." "What happened?" I presented her with false documents I had prepared, telling her that I had investigated Digital Consultants BM and had discovered they were not licensed to operate. I told her that if she continued to work with them, I would have to cancel all my contracts. I felt my breath stop, and she completely broke down. She confessed that the company was hers, that she had created the contracts to optimize the handling of modernization money. She said that technically it wasn't stealing because the money was being used to improve the company. Charles was present, and believe me, Florence, your son is in total shock. He had no idea what his wife was doing. "I'm on my way," I said, feeling adrenaline rush through my body. "Florence, there's something else." When she realized what she had confessed, Brenda told me that if I spoke to anyone about this, she would make sure I lost all my contracts. She threatened me directly. I closed my eyes and smiled. Brenda had just made the final mistake. Threatening a client was not only stupid, it was the kind of mistake that couldn't be undone. I called Mr. Herrera immediately. "It's time. Come with me." We walked towards the company together, me with my head held high and him with his briefcase full of legal documents. When we entered the building, all the employees looked at us with a mixture of surprise and relief. Joseph immediately appeared by my side. "Mrs. Miller," he whispered. "They're all in the meeting room. Mr. Charles is very quiet, Brenda is crying, and Mr. Albert looks very angry." "Perfect," I said. "Joseph, I want you to go get all the remaining employees. Tell them to come to the meeting room. It's time they knew the truth." When I opened the meeting room door, the scene was exactly as I had imagined it. Charles was sitting with his head in his hands, completely distraught. Brenda had red eyes from crying and looked at me with a mix of hatred and terror. Albert was standing by the window, his arms crossed and an expression that would have frozen hell. "Hello, Charles," I said in a calm voice. "Hello, Brenda." "Mom," Charles raised his head, and for the first time in weeks, I saw my real son, not the puppet Brenda had been controlling. "Mum, I didn't know anything about this." "I swear to you." "I know, my love," I said, approaching him. "I know you didn't know anything." Brenda got up from her chair like a cornered animal. "Florence, can you explain everything? This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, it's not?" I said, remaining perfectly calm. "Then what is it, Brenda? Can you explain why you created a shell company to steal money from the company I built over 30 years? "It's not stealing," she yelled, completely losing her composure. "It's resource optimization. The money is being used to improve the company." Mr. Herrera approached and placed his briefcase on the table. "Mrs. Brenda Miller, I am Mr. Herrera, the company's lawyer. What you describe as resource optimization is technically known as embezzlement and corporate fraud. Both are federal crimes." Brenda's face turned the color of ash. "No, you can't prove anything." I took out the folder with all the documents we had collected over weeks, the irregular bank transfers, the fake contract, the copies of the financial records that Fatima had saved. "Seriously, Brenda, do you think that after 30 years in this business, I don't know how to document an investigation?" At that moment, all the remaining employees entered the room. Joseph, Angelica, who had come to place an order and had stayed to listen to the scandal, Fabian, who had arrived for an appointment, even Fatima, who had appeared as if by magic. "I want everyone to hear this," I said, addressing my audience. "For the last few weeks while I was out of the company, this woman has not only been making decisions that have put all of your jobs at risk, but she has also been stealing money from the company." The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. "But there's something more important I want you to know," I continued. "This company isn't just mine. It belongs to all of us. It belongs to Joseph, who has worked here for 25 years. It belongs to Fatima, who kept our finances in order for 2 decades. It belongs to each of you who has dedicated years of your life to building something solid and reliable." I looked directly at Brenda, who was now visibly trembling. And no one, absolutely no one, is going to destroy what we have built together. The silence in the meeting room was broken when Brenda stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. Her eyes shone with a mixture of desperation and fury I had never seen before. "This is ridiculous," she yelled, pointing her finger at me. "You're just jealous because Charles finally realized that he needed someone young and capable to modernize this outdated company." Charles slowly stood up, as if each movement cost him superhuman effort. "Brenda, stop. You're only making things worse. Making things worse." She turned to him with wide eyes. "Charles, she's trying to destroy our marriage. This is revenge because she couldn't accept that she was no longer needed." Mr. Herrera opened his briefcase and took out a small recorder. "Mrs. Miller, everything you have said in the last 30 minutes has been recorded, including your confession about the creation of Digital Consultants BM and your direct threat to Mr. Albert Harrison." Brenda's face went from red to completely pale. She staggered slightly and had to lean on the table. "Furthermore," Mr. Herrera continued in a professional voice, "we have complete documentation of all the irregular transfers, copies of the falsified contracts, and testimonies from multiple witnesses about the detrimental decisions you have made during your management." Albert walked to the center of the room. His presence immediately commanded respect, and everyone present fell silent. "I want everyone to hear this very clearly," he said in his deep, slow voice. "For 25 years, I have maintained contracts with this company for an annual value of $800,000. For 25 years, Florence Miller and her team have handled my business with absolute professionalism and honesty." He looked directly at Brenda. "In 3 weeks under your management, you not only demonstrated total incompetence, but you also tried to deceive me, you threatened me directly, and you put contracts representing millions of dollars at risk." "Mr. Harrison," Brenda stammered, "I can explain everything. There were misunderstandings." "There are no misunderstandings," Albert interrupted her firmly. "There are facts. And the fact is that you are incompetent, dishonest, and dangerous for any serious business." Joseph timidly approached from the back of the room. "Excuse me," he said in a trembling voice, "but there's something else I think everyone should know." All eyes turned to him. Joseph had been a silent witness to everything for weeks and knew that what he was about to say could change everything. During these 3 weeks, Mrs. Brenda not only made wrong decisions, she started gaining trust gradually. She was also reviewing the personal files of all the employees. She was preparing a list for mass layoffs. A murmur of indignation ran through the room. Angelica, who had been listening in silence, stood up. "Mass layoffs?" she asked in a tense voice. "How many people are we talking about?" Joseph looked at Brenda, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last few minutes. "Of all the people over 45 years old, she said they were resistant to change and that she needed new blood throughout the company." The impact of those words was like a bomb. Fatima put her hand to her chest. Fabian clenched his fists, and I could see several employees looking at each other with expressions of shock and rage. "That's not true," Brenda murmured weakly, but her voice had lost all conviction. "I have copies of the documents," Joseph continued, taking some crumpled papers from his pocket. "I've found them in her trash. A list with names, ages, and the note 'dispensable due to age' next to each one." Charles slumped into his chair as if he had been physically hit. "Brenda," he whispered, "tell me this isn't true." For the first time since the scandal had begun, Brenda seemed truly defeated. Her shoulders slumped and she avoided looking anyone in the eyes. It was just a preliminary evaluation," she murmured, "to optimize the organizational structure." "Optimize?" Fatima's voice was like a whip. "You call destroying the lives of people who have dedicated decades to this company optimization?" "Fatima is right," I said, feeling the cold rage I had been holding back for weeks finally find its release. "Brenda, you are not only a thief and a liar, you are also a systematic destroyer of everything this company stands for." I addressed the center of the room, looking at each person present. This company was built on values of loyalty, respect, and teamwork. For 30 years, we have been a family. We have celebrated successes together. We have overcome crises together. We have taken care of each other in difficult times. My voice grew stronger. And this woman thought she could come here and destroy all of that in a few weeks. Brenda raised her head with a final flash of defiance. You can't fire me. I'm Charles's wife. He owns the company. Charles stood up slowly. Throughout the confrontation, he had been quiet, processing the enormity of what he was discovering about the woman he had married. When he spoke, his voice sounded completely different, as if he had matured 10 years in 1 hour. Brenda, he said with a blood-curdling calm, you don't own anything, and after what I've just heard, you're not going to be my wife anymore either. The shock on Brenda's face was total. What? What are you saying? I'm saying that for 3 weeks you lied to me, you manipulated me, and you almost destroyed everything my mother built over 30 years. I'm saying you stole money from the company, you threatened our best clients, and you planned to fire people who are like family to me. Charles came over to me and took my hands. His eyes were full of tears of remorse. Mum, he said in a broken voice, forgive me, I was an idiot. I let myself be completely fooled. I almost lost the most valuable thing I have for a woman who turned out to be a scammer. I felt my own heart break and mend at the same time. My son was back. The Charles I had raised, who knew the value of honest work and respect for people, was back. Charles, I said, squeezing his hands, we all make mistakes. The important thing is to recognize them and correct them. Mr. Herrera cleared his throat. Mrs. Miller, given that we have solid evidence of embezzlement, corporate fraud, and threats to clients, I am going to proceed with filing a formal complaint with the authorities. We are also going to initiate the process to recover all the money that has been illegally transferred. Brenda completely collapsed, sinking into her chair and beginning to cry uncontrollably. No, you can't do this. I only wanted to help. I only wanted to prove that I could be as good as Florence. Brenda, I said, feeling almost compassionate for how pathetic she looked. If you really wanted to help, you would have asked, you would have learned, you would have respected the experience of the people who have been in this business for decades. I approached her one last time. But instead you decided you knew more than all of us combined. You decided you could steal, lie, and destroy without consequences. I raised my voice so that everyone could hear me clearly. Brenda Miller, you are fired from this company immediately. And if you ever set foot in this building again, I will have you arrested for trespassing. The silence that followed was absolute. Brenda got up, staggering, picked up her purse with trembling hands and walked towards the door like a defeated woman. Before leaving, she turned one last time. This isn't over, she murmured with venom in her voice. You're right, I replied with a cold smile. It's just beginning, because now I have to rebuild everything you destroyed. The door closed behind her with a final sound that marked the end of the longest professional nightmare of my life. Once Brenda left the room, silence extended for several seconds that seemed eternal. I could feel the expectant looks of all the employees, waiting to see what would happen now. Charles was still standing next to me, but I could perceive his confusion and shame radiating like heat. Well, I finally said, addressing the whole group, I think you all deserve a full explanation of what's going to happen now. Joseph was the first to speak. Mrs. Miller, does this mean you're coming back? The question on everyone's mind. For weeks I had been planning this moment, but now that I was here, I realized that things couldn't simply go back to how they were. Too much had changed, too many lessons had been learned. Joseph, I said, I'm coming back, but not in the same way. This company is going to change, and it's going to change for the better. I walked towards the head of the meeting table, the place from which I had led thousands of meetings for 30 years. Feeling the familiar wooden surface under my hands gave me back the confidence I had been losing during these difficult weeks. The first thing I want to do is apologize to all of you. I began, looking at each person present. You didn't deserve to go through this uncertainty. You didn't deserve to have your jobs threatened by the whims of an incompetent person. Fatima wiped a tear. Florence, you don't have to apologize. We knew you would never have abandoned us voluntarily. Thank you, Fatima, but I do have to apologize because I allowed my wounded pride to prevent me from acting faster. I should have intervened from day one, not after 3 weeks of disasters. Albert came over and put his hand on my shoulder. Florence, what you did was perfect. You documented everything, you gathered solid evidence, and you waited for the exact right moment to act. That's not pride, that's intelligent strategy. Charles finally found his voice. Mum, he said in a broken voice, I'm the one who should be apologizing to everyone. I was the one who brought Brenda here. I was the one who replaced you without even consulting you. I was the one who almost destroyed everything you worked for. I came over to my son and put my hands on his shoulders. Charles, my love, we all make mistakes, but now what matters is how we correct them. How can I correct something like this? He asked, his eyes full of tears. I almost lost the company. I almost lost the employees. I almost lost you. You didn't lose me, I said firmly, and you're not going to lose me. But we have to talk about how we're going to handle things from now on. Mr. Herrera cleared his throat. Excuse me for interrupting, but there are urgent legal matters we need to handle. We need to immediately change all bank authorizations to prevent further irregular transfers, and we need to prepare the documentation for the formal complaint. You're right, I said. Fatima, can you take care of contacting the bank immediately? We need to freeze any account that Brenda might have had access to. I'm on it, Fatima replied, pulling out her phone. I'm also going to review all transactions from the last 2 months to make sure we haven't missed anything. I turned to Joseph. Joseph, I need you to do a complete inventory of everything that changed during these 3 weeks. Supplier contacts, modified systems, procedures that were changed. Everything. Understood, Mrs. Miller. Also include the list of clients who had problems, especially that list. We're going to personally contact each of them to explain the situation and assure them that things are going to get back to normal. Albert raised his hand. Florence, can I help with that? My reputation in the sector can open many doors. If some clients are hesitant, a recommendation from me can make all the difference. Albert, you're an angel, but there's something more important I need to discuss with all of you. Silence settled in the room again. The time had come for the most difficult conversation. During these weeks, I realized something very important. This company has depended too much on me for too long. That's not healthy for anyone. Charles looked at me with alarm. Mum, don't tell me you're thinking of retiring. I'm not thinking of retiring completely, but I am thinking of making some important changes. Charles, you are the legal owner of this company. It's time for you to learn to truly run it. But, Mum, after what happened with Brenda, I don't trust my own judgment. Exactly, that's why you need to learn. But you're not going to learn alone. We're going to work together step by step until you have the necessary experience and confidence. I addressed the whole group. I also want to do something I should have done years ago. I want some of you to become minor partners in the company. The impact of my words was immediate. Joseph went pale. Fatima put her hand to her chest, and even Albert seemed surprised. Fatima, I continued, after 20 years of impeccably managing our finances, you deserve to be more than an employee. Joseph, after 25 years of absolute loyalty, you deserve to have a share in the company's success. Mrs. Miller, Joseph murmured in a broken voice, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet. Mr. Herrera is going to prepare all the legal documents, but I want you to know that this decision is not charity or a reward for what happened. It's a recognition of what should always have been. Charles looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in years, pure admiration. Mum, that's the smartest decision you've ever made. No, Charles, the smartest decision was building this company by surrounding myself with people I could trust completely. What I'm doing now is simply officially recognizing that reality. Albert applauded slowly. Florence, in 40 years of business, I have never seen anyone handle a crisis so serious with such class and wisdom. Albert, I didn't do it alone, and that's exactly the lesson I learned from all of this. None of us can handle everything alone. We need to trust our team, value experience, and never allow ego to make us make stupid decisions. I looked directly at Charles when I said that last part. He nodded, understanding the message perfectly. Now, I said, resuming my executive tone, we have a lot of work to do. We have to recover the stolen money, restore our clients' trust, and rebuild everything that was damaged. Where do we start? Charles asked. We start where we've always started, with honest work, attention to detail, and respect for every person who trusts us. Fatima timidly raised her hand. Florence, there's something I think you should know. During these weeks, while all this chaos was happening, several competitors tried to steal our clients, but most of our clients rejected them. They said they preferred to wait for you to come back. I felt my eyes well up with tears. After 30 years, after all the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights, all the risks taken, this was the biggest validation I could receive. Then, I said in a firm voice, let's not let them down. Let's get back to work. The following days were a whirlwind of intense activity. My office, which had been empty for 3 weeks, was filled with life again, but this time it was different. Charles had set up his desk next to mine, determined to learn every aspect of the business from scratch. Seeing him meticulously take notes while I explained the details of each contract filled me with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. Mum, he said to me on Thursday morning as we reviewed the financial reports Fatima had prepared, I can't believe how complex it really is to run this company. I thought I knew the business, but I was just scratching the surface. Charles, running a company isn't just about making decisions. It's about understanding the consequences of each decision on every person who depends on you. It's about building relationships that last for decades. It's about thinking not just about this month's profits, but about the sustainability of the next 20 years. Joseph appeared at the door with a smile I hadn't seen on his face in weeks. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Charles, I have excellent news. Angelica just confirmed that she's renewing her annual contract. She says that after seeing how we handled this crisis, she trusts us more than ever. Seriously? Charles stood up excitedly. But we almost lost her as a client because of Brenda. Exactly, I explained. Angelica saw how we responded when things got difficult. She saw that we don't abandon our clients, that we fight to make things right. That's the difference between building a business and simply selling products. Fatima entered with a thick folder under her arm. Florence, Charles, I have the full report on the financial damage caused by Brenda. The news is mixed. We sat around the meeting table as Fatima spread out sheets full of numbers and charts. The bad news first, she began with her characteristic precision. Brenda transferred a total of $240,000 to her shell company during these 3 weeks. She also spent an additional $60,000 on consulting and modernization that turned out to be completely useless. Charles went pale. $300,000? My God, Fatima, that puts the company at risk. Let me finish, Fatima continued with a mysterious smile. The good news is that Mr. Herrera managed to freeze the accounts of Digital Consultants BM before Brenda could withdraw the money. We have recovered $210,000. I felt a huge weight lift from my chest. And the other $30,000? She spent those on a new car and clothes. Mr. Herrera says we can sue her civilly to recover them, but it could take months. I don't care about the time, I said firmly. I want her to understand that actions have consequences. Every penny she stole must be returned. Albert entered the office without warning, something he only did when he had very important news. His expression was serious but not worried. Florence, Charles, I need to talk to you. It's about Brenda. Charles immediately tensed. What's wrong? Is she causing more problems? On the contrary. Albert sat down with us. I just got a call from Fabian. It seems Brenda has been trying to get a job at competing companies. And? I asked, though I had a feeling there was more to the story. And it seems her reputation preceded her. Fabian knows the owners of North American Industrial Materials. He told them the whole story. They immediately called other business owners in the sector to warn them. Charles's eyes widened in surprise. You mean? I mean that no one in the industry is going to hire Brenda. Her career in this sector is over. A part of me felt satisfied by the poetic justice of the situation. Brenda had tried to destroy my reputation, but in the end, she had destroyed her own. Albert, I said, I appreciate you letting us know this, but I don't want us to spend any more time thinking about Brenda. We have more important things to deal with. You're right, Albert nodded. In fact, I mainly came to discuss something much more positive, my expansion into Central America. Charles's eyes lit up. The $2 million project? Exactly. After seeing how you handled this crisis, I not only want to continue being your client, I want you to be strategic partners in the entire expansion. The silence that followed was one of complete astonishment. A contract of that magnitude would completely transform the size and scope of our company. Albert, I said carefully, that's an incredible proposal, but we need to make sure we're prepared for such a huge commitment. That's why I want to work as partners, not just as a supplier and client. Florence, your experience and your team are exactly what I need. Charles, your energy and your willingness to learn are perfect for this type of challenge. Charles looked at me with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Mum, what do you think? I think it's exactly the kind of opportunity that defines a company's future, but I also think we need to plan it meticulously. For the next 2 hours, we discussed the details of the project. Albert needed specialized materials to build a chain of hardware stores in Guatemala, Honduras, and Costa Rica. It was complex, required international coordination, and meant expanding our operations beyond anything we had done before. You know what's most ironic about all of this? I said to Charles while Albert reviewed some documents. What? Brenda said the company needed to modernize and grow. In the end, her incompetence and criminality led us to exactly that modernization and growth, but in the right way. Charles smiled for the first time in weeks with genuine joy. It's as if everything had been a test. It was a test, I told him. A test of our values, our resilience, and our ability to work together when things get difficult. Joseph appeared at the door again, this time with an urgent expression. Mrs. Miller, there's a call for you. It's a reporter from the local newspaper. He says he wants to do an article about successful family businesses that have overcome crises. I looked at Charles and then at Albert. What do you think? Are we ready for that kind of attention? Mum, Charles said with a confidence I hadn't heard in his voice in a long time, I think we have a story worth telling. Albert nodded. A story about values, loyalty, and how good decisions always trump quick ones. All right, I said to Joseph. Tell the reporter we accept the interview, but to come prepared for a real story, not a superficial press release. That afternoon, while I was organizing my office for the next day's interview, I found an old photo I had kept on my desk for years. It was from the company's opening ceremony 30 years ago. My father was symbolically handing me the keys to the premises, and I looked like a scared girl trying to feign confidence. Charles came over and looked at the photo over my shoulder. You look so young. I felt so young and so scared. I had no idea that building a company required so much more than technical knowledge. What else does it require? It requires the ability to trust the right people, the wisdom to recognize when you're wrong, and the strength to do the right thing even when it's the hardest thing to do. Charles sat in the chair in front of my desk, in the same position he had been sitting in 3 weeks ago when he announced that Brenda would be replacing me. Mom, he said in a soft voice, I'm so sorry I put you in that position. I'm sorry I doubted you. Charles, don't be sorry. Learn from it. The next time someone tries to convince you that experience is worthless, remember these weeks. The next time I'm going to listen to you from the very beginning. No, I said firmly. The next time you're going to ask your own intelligent questions, you're going to investigate for yourself, and you're going to make decisions based on evidence, not on promises. Do you think one day I'll be as good at this as you are? Charles, I said, smiling with all the love and pride I felt. I think you're going to be much better than me because you're going to have something I never had. The wisdom that comes from having seen what happens when things go wrong. 3 months after Brenda's departure, I found myself sitting in the same meeting room where it had all begun, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The table was surrounded by familiar faces and some new ones, all smiling as we celebrated the signing of the largest contract in the company's history. Albert had brought his partners from Central America for the official ceremony. Charles, dressed in his best suit and with a confidence that had grown week after week, was presenting the project details with a professionalism that filled me with pride. Joseph, now an official minor partner, was coordinating the logistics of the international expansion with an efficiency that showed why he had been my right-hand man for so many years. And with this, Charles announced, signing the last page of the contract, we officially begin the most ambitious phase in the history of Miller and Associates. Applause filled the room. Fatima, who had also been named a minor partner, came over with a bottle of champagne she had kept hidden for the occasion. I think this calls for a celebration, she said with a radiant smile as she uncorked the bottle. As I poured the glasses, I couldn't help but remember what this same room had looked like 3 months ago. The tense silence, the worried faces, the uncertainty about the future. Now we were celebrating contracts worth $3 million over the next 5 years. Florence, Albert said, raising his glass. I want to make a toast to a woman who turned her company's worst crisis into its best opportunity for growth. To Florence. Everyone cheered in unison. Wait, I said, raising my hand. If we're going to make a toast, let's do it right. This success isn't mine, it's ours. I stood up and looked at each person in the room. Joseph, without your loyalty and your courage to document everything that was going wrong, we never would have been able to act in time. Fatima, without your financial meticulousness and your ability to keep impeccable records, we never would have recovered the stolen money. Joseph blushed, but his smile was one of genuine pride. Mrs. Miller, you taught us that doing the right thing is always worth it, no matter how difficult it is. Mr. Herrera, I continued, addressing the lawyer, without your legal expertise and your quickness to act, Brenda could have caused irreparable damage. Albert, without your patience and your trust in us during the crisis, we would have lost not only a client, but a true friend. And Charles, I said finally, turning to my son, without your humility to recognize mistakes and your determination to learn from them, none of this would have been possible. Charles came over and hugged me tight. Mom, these 3 months working with you have been the best business education I could have ever received. Do you know what the most important lesson you learned was? I asked him. That true success isn't measured only in money, but in the trust and loyalty of the people who work with you. Exactly. And that trust is built day by day with small and large decisions over years. Angelica, who had arrived for the celebration, raised her glass. I want to say something too. During these difficult weeks, I saw how many companies would have simply collapsed, but you not only survived, you became stronger. Angelica is right, added Fabian, who had also come to celebrate. What we witnessed here was a masterclass in how to handle a crisis with integrity. The local newspaper reporter, who had been documenting the entire story for the last few months, came over with his recorder. Mrs. Miller, after following this story from the beginning, I have to ask you, did you ever doubt that things would turn out well? The question made me reflect. You know what? There were moments, especially the first nights after being replaced, when I wondered if maybe Brenda was right, if maybe I was obsolete, if maybe 30 years of experience were worthless in the modern world. And what convinced you otherwise? The results. Experience isn't just accumulated knowledge, it's the ability to make the right decisions under pressure, to understand the long-term consequences of short-term actions, and to build relationships that withstand storms. Charles joined the conversation. And I also learned that true modernization doesn't mean discarding everything that works, it means combining the wisdom of the past with the tools of the present. Speaking of the tools of the present, Joseph said with a mischievous smile, "You know, I got a very interesting call today." We all turned to look at him curiously. It was from a company in the city. They wanted to hire me to help them document irregularities in their competition. Apparently, my reputation as a corporate detective has spread. Laughter filled the room. Joseph had developed an unexpected talent for investigation during the crisis with Brenda, and now other business owners wanted to take advantage of his skills. "And what did you tell them?" Charles asked. "I told them I already have a job, thanks, that I'm a partner in the best construction materials company in the country, and that I wouldn't trade my place here for anything in the world." Fatima wiped a tear. "You know what's the most beautiful things about all of this? That Brenda thought she could destroy us by separating us, but all she managed to do was bring us closer together." "It's true," I reflected. "For years we worked well together, but this crisis truly made us a family." The office phone rang, and Joseph got up to answer it. He returned a minute later with an amused expression. "Guess who called, asking if we have any job openings available?" "Don't tell me," Charles began. "Brenda," Joseph confirmed. "She said she had reflected on her mistakes and wanted a second chance." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds before the whole room burst into laughter. "I hope you told her we'd consider her application," I said when I could stop laughing. "Seriously, Mrs. Miller?" "Of course," I said. "We'd tell her we'd consider it right after she returned every penny she stole, publicly apologized to every client she mistreated, and completed a 2-year corporate ethics program." "And if she accepts all those conditions?" Charles asked, playing along. "Then we would consider her for a position in the cleaning department under Joseph's direct supervision, with a 10-year probationary period." The laughter renewed. It was liberating to be able to laugh at what had been the most stressful experience of my professional career. Albert came over to me while the others continued celebrating. "Florence, there's something I've been wanting to ask you for weeks. Don't you feel even a little bit of vengeful satisfaction for how everything turned out for Brenda?" I thought about the question carefully. "You know what, Albert? At first, yes. The first few weeks after she left, every time I heard about her problems finding a job, I felt vindicated, but not anymore. Not anymore, because I realized that the best revenge isn't seeing your enemy fail. The best revenge is building something so successful and solid that their attempts to destroy you end up being irrelevant." "That's pure wisdom," Albert nodded. "Besides, Eyes," I continued, "Brenda is no longer my enemy. She's just a person who made very bad decisions and who is now living with the consequences. I don't have time to hold a grudge against someone who no longer has any power over my life." Charles came over to us. "Mum, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Throughout this whole process, did you ever really consider retiring, getting away from it all?" The question surprised me with its honesty. There was one night, probably 2 weeks after Brenda replaced me, when I sat at home and thought, maybe it's time, maybe 30 years is enough. "What made you change your mind?" "You," I said simply, "and Joseph and Fatima and Albert and all the clients who asked for me. I realized that retiring at that moment would not have been rest. It would have been abandoning the people who trusted me. And now? Now that everything is resolved, now I know that I will retire someday, but it will be when you are completely ready to handle everything without me, and it will be on my terms, not because of the manipulations of a scam artist." "How long do you think that will take?" "Ask me in 5 years," I said with a smile. "But for now, we have a company to expand, contracts to fulfill, and a reputation to maintain." As the sun set through the office windows, looking at all these people who had fought with me through the most difficult crisis of my career, I realized something fundamental. I had started this story feeling like everything had been taken from me. I was ending it by understanding that in reality, I had gained much more than I had lost. I had gained the certainty that I had built something solid and lasting. I had gained my son's renewed respect. I had gained true partners instead of just employees. And I had gained the satisfaction of knowing that when things got really difficult, I had responded with wisdom, patience, and integrity. Brenda had wanted to replace me, but in the end, she had achieved something much better. She had proven that I was irreplaceable, not because of my control, but because of my values. And those values now lived in every person in this room. "You know what?" I said, raising my glass once more. "Let's toast to Brenda." Everyone looked at me in total surprise. "To Brenda," I continued with a smile, because without knowing it, she gave us the greatest gift we could receive, the opportunity to show what we are really made of. And as everyone raised their glasses, laughing, I knew that this story had ended exactly as it should have, not with revenge, but with triumph, not with bitterness, but with gratitude, not with an end, but with a new beginning better than everything we had built before.